Although it's important from a narrative standpoint, the word exposition has become a bad word when it comes to storytelling.
Oh my.
Not because it's not important, but more because of a lack of proper use in most popular media.
So, what's going on, everybody? I'm Lloyd.
And I'm Natasha with
Midnight
Midnight
Comics.
Comics, and welcome to this video where we're talking about how exposition is not a bad word. In fact, it's actually a really good thing when done properly.
When done properly. So, we'll bring up some examples in this video and stuff like that, but I'll let you start because I want to do this, the don'ts. I think that's what I really want to do.
Lord have mercy. So, the definition of exposition is a comprehensive description and explanation of an idea or a theory. So, what are some of the ways in which we can use exposition or how we can get exposition across? One way, of course, is in
flashbacks.
Yes.
Okay.
Flashbacks.
I got really excited for some reason. I thought about Bleach just now.
Really? You said flashbacks, and the first thing that popped in my head was Naruto.
Okay.
Not like Naruto flashbacks were needed for exposition, because it was usually something we literally just saw the last episode or 5 minutes ago in the same episode. Okay. I swear, if we saw that swing one more time.
More screen time than 10-10.
No, more screen time than 10-10. But, to be fair, 10-10 had more screen time in the anime than she had in the manga.
And moving on.
Another way of giving exposition is through dialogue. Essentially, basic everyday conversation. And don't make it
clunky,
weird and clunky and awkward when you do it.
I have a specific example soon.
I know. There are ways to give exposition through dialogue that's not weird, where the conversation still flows. It's possible, I promise.
Right. We just, matter of fact, if you guys checked out our show, What We're Reading, we talk about how there's kind of just authentic conversation that gives you an idea of what the friend group, what happened in the past, so on and so forth, without saying, hey, reader, this thing that I want you to specifically know about, here's the thing, we're talking about that thing. Like, no, Okamis as well, talking about kind of that dialogue and stuff like that, where it's not, the exposition. Where
my brain went Joystick Angels, but it was still Ray Comics, so same thing. Another way to give exposition is through narration. Now, to be fair, narration is one of my least favorite ways for exposition. I'm not a big fan of narration, even in stories I like. I'm just like, the narration wasn't necessarily needed or essential, but even in certain stories I like narration. Now, there are ways narration is used where it's like, okay, well, this made sense, but a lot of time when people use narration for exposition, it was completely unneeded. The same thing came across in the actual story. Just let me enjoy the story.
Enjoy the story, right?
Please. Another way of giving exposition is through visual cues. So, of course, as we're world building and giving the story, there can be things in the background, in the setting, in the world that we see that tells us a little bit about what's going on.
A good example, in-game, where they were still playing, or no, not even in-game. Let's go to Last of Us, where the last system that dropped, Last of Us 1 when it first came out, the last system that anybody had was a PS3. And so you see the PS3 all nice and dusty in the corner and stuff. It wouldn't make sense for there to be a PS4, PS5. They didn't make it past that certain time period.
But I will say, to be fair, same people, of course. Uncharted, the last thing they got was a PS2.
No, 1.
Or was it the 1?
Yeah,
was she playing the 1?
They did a good job of.
Their daughter playing
Crash Bandicoot. Yeah,
it was. Crash.
They did a good job of putting Uncharted in this kind of ambiguous era,
time period,
right? You did not have any idea as to when the events were really taking place. It's modern.
It felt early 2000s.
It was like it's modern time period, but it wasn't until they had their daughter at the end of 4. Spoilers, I guess, and she was playing. Actually, he played
in another.
Yeah, they played it at the beginning of the 4th one. Yeah. However, regardless, it's just like, oh snap! So now in the last game, we're in the 90s.
4, Drake, as a PS1,
and then she was playing trying to be
his
high
daughter
score,
also,
So it's just like, holy crap! So that's a really good way of like, hey, I'm not telling you, hey guys, the year is 1995. Like, no, it's here you go. That's the nod. So now you can kind of place. Well, how did everything else kind of play out?
2 more ways of doing exposition, and I put these two together because one is an epilogue and the other is a prologue.
But just in case you didn't know,
prologue, because the word pro meaning, proceeding, and prologue comes before the story itself. The epilogue comes at the end of the story itself. And these are ways of giving exposition because they just give a little bit more story. The funny thing is, through those, you still have to properly write it because it's still story being written.
Right.
So
we actually did this in the Blue Morphle Intimate Era issue because, when we start the chapter off, she's captured, right? How did we get here?
The butterfly is captured.
The butterfly is captured, not Blue Morpho. But even if you read the old Butterfly comics, her issue 1 and 2, right? You see her, kick butt, take names, same thing as all classic stories, right? The hero saves the day or whatever, and they get out of there. But then that was it. We haven't seen anything else from the Butterfly officially, right? Since the 70s. From them, right? And now here we are picking it up. Like, okay, well, let's explain why without having that dialogue in the story. So we said the story so far is Butterfly and X, Y, and Z. They were doing this, that, and the third. However, this time around, right? And then we pick up the story. I don't think that's how it's worded, but essentially that's the gist of it, right?
Well, that's not how I thought. I think of that as more of a, what's the word?
Recap?
Years of reading novels. The prologue is a story that comes before the main story. And of course, the epilogue is another story or a chapter at the end of the main story.
I see.
It's not a part of the main story.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Right. Maybe I misunderstood.
Maybe a little bit.
Isn't that cute? But it's wrong!
And of course, the last way that we have anyway is through the action of the story. You can use the action that is taking place in a story as a way of giving information without shoving information. Oh, this person here is fighting. They're really good. Oh, look at that move they did. This person is a martial arts master. Boom. I didn't have to go through this long explanation of they practiced martial arts for 20 years and are now really good and blah, 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 blah. No, you just saw it. You saw them fight. You see that they can fight. I don't have to tell you with words that they can fight. I just told you by you being able to see it with your eyes.
So, the don'ts.
The first don't is don't overload your audience with exposition right out the gate or at any other point in time, to be honest. And I think that works for the example you had.
Yes, exactly that. So the X-Men joint, the newer ones, right? The From the Ashes, I think the first issue of that, you had Cyclops say, I know we talked about this plan, but let's go over it.
Let's talk about this plan again.
One more time.
In the middle of executing the plan.
That doesn't make sense. Like, you didn't have to do that. Like, that I rolled my eyes so heavy.
I don't complain about a lot of X-Men stories.
But that was was very clunky. Like, just because you're addressing it does not make it okay. Like, oh, we talked about it already, but like, no. You guys could have just showed us that. Like,
show the plan.
You could have just montaged the rescue, or what they were doing in that issue. You could have just montaged that. They did. It's like, oh, y'all figured out how to do that. Yep. Here's the rest of it. Anyway, that was my example. I was very excited about that one. It was very cool.
I guess we can go back to the age-old adage of Naruto, overloading with all the flashbacks within flashbacks within flashbacks within dreams of things we saw 5 minutes ago.
Right.
Another thing to not do is don't tell, show. I mean, telling is okay every so often. Sometimes there's no other way to get what you're trying to say across other than to tell it. Have someone say it, maybe narration, an occasion, whatever. But if you can, show us. If it's a comic, if it's an animation, you can show us in the background. You can show us by what the people are doing. Maybe there's a sign. If it's a book, you're describing the scene, describing what's happening. Like, show us. Give us visuals.
So, exposition is not a bad word. Just use it properly.
So, don't interrupt the story, please. Now this is where I will complain about Bleach. Now, again, a lot of it wasn't exposition, it was filler. But as much as I love Bleach, they're every freaking season, it's just like, all right, we're in Hueco Mundo.
Hueco Mundo.
We're in Hueco Mundo. We're fighting bad guys. We're getting there. We're getting closer to Aizen. and we're back at school doing some random shenanigans for 2 episodes
with Cone.
And I don't mean just with Cone. I mean they're all there with Cone.
Right.
Doing stuff that has nothing to do with what was just happening.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie, there don't be bad episodes, but I'd be like, this is not what I came back for.
Right.
Like at least with Dragon Ball back in the day on Toonami, it was like, okay, we got to the Namek Saga and the series started over.
No, I was gonna say like they'd be on the way to Namek, and there's that one further episode where they run into those kids.
At least that was along the way.
Right, but that was complete part of filler. Yeah, like that is.
It was filler, but it was part of the adventure.
Yeah,
it wasn't. This has nothing to like. It didn't interrupt the story.
Yeah,
it was still the story going. It was just a filler episode that wasn't the manga that nobody really cared about because it wasn't the manga.
Right.
Unless you didn't read the manga, which most people watching Dragon Ball Z haven't read the manga. But I'm saying with the Bleach, it's not the same. Like Dragon Ball didn't interrupt the story. It just made us watch the whole story all over again. Bleach interrupted the story to give us something completely unrelated to what was happening, and it wasn't even
exposition.
Mm-hmm.
At least give me the exposition if you're gonna do that, but also still, like, don't interrupt the story with exposition. Don't have us in the Soul Society running along trying to save Rukia, and then we have to stop and listen to some dude monologue for 10 minutes about why we're here, how we got here, what we're doing, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. We should know this already.
Right.
Or maybe he's monologuing about how he got here and we've never seen this guy. You can give us tidbits and pieces, or maybe we can learn about you later. You're not important right now, you know? As much as I love the captains. Like, if I had to say Kenpachi had the best exposition throughout the entire series, he is one of my favorite characters. Because it's just like, you just get to see this dude get stronger every time you see him. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, Kenpachi, he's one of the few captains who was able to make captain without having a Bankai because he's just that powerful. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's pretty dope. Okay. Oh, dang, Ichigo, you beat this man later. Oh, he wasn't being serious in that fight. It's time for me to actually use both of my hands.
Right. Ridiculous.
Oh, well, actually.
But right.
I, could do this thing. And to avoid spoilers, I'm not going to explain, just in case what happens during the, the final arc and stuff.
But but I love that they didn't even have to full out say, yeah, he was holding back. Just the fact that it was like, okay, I'll use 2 hands. It's just like,
right. He didn't say, I can use both of my hands. He just said, he just was like, nah, let me take my eye patch off real quick.
He was like,
oh, snap. He's super powerful.
He was he was allowing this to siphon off his energy so he didn't fight at full power. Oh, he's not using both hands. Mm-hmm. Oh, he doesn't have, like, all of these things are just like, oh, he's him, but he's holding himself back so he can have fun. Like, there it is, right? He doesn't have to continuously say, oh, I'm only using X amount of my power right now. Like, I get it. You're not fighting at your best right now. I think that was a slight jab at Frieza, but I think that was actually pretty good exposition as well.
Right. Our last don't that we have is don't treat the audience like they're stupid.
Mm-hmm. You don't have to spoon feed the information. Again, if you're doing exposition properly, it's not, hey guys, look at this thing. Like, remember that thing I told you 6 minutes ago or 5 pages ago or, X amount of scenes ago? It's like, let it click. Let them figure it out. And so
it will happen. I think we said that about Ray Comics. We said that more about Alchemist, where you just was like, they didn't treat you like with the twist. Stupid.
Right. It was
they just let it happen, and you can figure it out along the way.
They laid out the breadcrumbs, and you're just like, I feel like you're going for that. Oh, you are going for that, and it wasn't like, ha ha ha, do you remember 6 pages ago when we said, you're like, no.
Right. It was along the way. He was like, yo, who is you? And he was just like, well, I'm just a guy.
Right.
And then later on down the line, as you're watching, if you're paying attention, you're seeing the clues.
Mm-hmm. Even the visuals, right? When you look at the fit, you look at the fighting style, you look at X, Y, and Z, like, oh, maybe. And then when it happens, like, oh, I knew it. I knew it. I should have guessed that. And so that's utilizing basically everything that we just said, utilizing exposition.
Right. Utilizing exposition properly.
Right.
So moving on now to the do's, the have funs, the how-tos, all those things. So be subtle. Don't shove it all in your face immediately. Be subtle. Put those breadcrumbs in there like we said they did with Alchemist. And let us figure it out as we go along. We'll see the PS1 in your cabinet. We'll see you fight. All these different things where You don't realize it's exposition because no one calls it exposition until it gets clunky. Also, do effectively world build. Build your world effectively and properly. I love fantasy stories when it's just like, this is just how the world works. Like, I know in like doing research for my own fantasy story that I'm writing, it's just like, all right, this is what this is called, this is what this is called, this is how this works. I have that all written down on the side for my notes. And then if anyone asks, you
wouldn't be able to answer that question.
I need to answer the question because, maybe they just didn't understand how it worked. But in the story itself, you don't have to explain every little thing. It just is. If in my world, I'm trying not to use an example from my actual book.
I see.
In my world, there are fairies, and those fairies have magical powers, and they're able to look you in the eye and make you freeze, and then you collapse. Then I don't need to say fairies have this ability called freezer, where they look you in the eye and you freeze and collapse. Instead, in the book, the fairy will just look you in the eye, and the person will freeze and collapse. It wasn't actually. That was completely.
Jujutsu Kaisen is good, but it has a lot of
exposition, especially if you're reading it, like me.
And it's like they always got
the sad thing is, I was going to use an example from Jujutsu Kaisen earlier, but it was going to be a good example.
Like, they always got to double back on, like, well, they're able to do this because of like, nah, you already explained the rules of the universe, bro. Like, it don't make sense, bro. It don't make sense. I enjoy it, but it don't make no sense, bro. Don't hate me. Don't at me. No, please at me. I'll argue.
He will. He's probably instigating you right now.
I'm instigating whoever.
Let us know in the comments if you agree with him or if he's actually lost his mind.
Exposition is very clunky.
And also let us know if you want to argue with him.
I'm sorry.
It is clunky though. So, moving along, right along with properly world building is properly character building. We don't need Soul to tell us every 5 seconds, I have the power of a sun god.
Oh, right. Fair enough. Right.
He just is.
Right.
He just is a character who has the ability of two deities inside of him. And we see him utilizing these powers and abilities to fight. We don't need him to be like, oh man, I have these really awesome abilities, but I'm not the best at controlling them yet.
If only I had trained my powers. If only I knew more. Like, no.
Instead, you have stuff like, his dad teasing him is like, dude, yeah, you're super strong, but you just throw your weight around. That's why you get wrecked every time you get into a fight.
Right.
Who cares how strong you are if you can't use it properly? His friend is like, all right, let's train because you need it. You are really bad at fighting.
Right.
These are not exact quotes.
Right, but that is essentially what's happening there. And now it's just like, now it helps you understand some more of that history. Like, he hasn't had an opportunity to fight anything in his weight class too often, right? And so now he's kind of just complacent, right? And so now you're able to gather that additional information about the character, about the story and stuff.
Just assuming you haven't heard us talk about it.
Assuming you haven't heard us talk about anything of that nature. But yeah, like, you get to learn more of the characters with exposition done correctly, or you open the door to be able to showcase more of your character.
At least in our personal opinion, if you want to be able to disagree, then you got to buy the book and read it for yourself to let us know if you think that we're telling the truth. So, all that being said, we know that
exposition
is a necessary evil. We just have to use it properly. If we don't underestimate our audience, if we make things clear, if we don't overdo it, if we don't interrupt the story, if we properly build our world and our characters and just let the story flow, because now exposition also falls into how pacing works, then it'll be done right and we don't have to be mad about it all the time.
That was solid. That was solid. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you guys for tuning into this. I don't know what this is exactly called, but I guess just our little video about exposition and how it's not a bad word. And don't forget to like and subscribe and all that other good stuff. And remember, until next time, midnight is coming.
Summer night, it's summer night. She left me so late, should've spent the night. No need to hit follies, I'm working her body out. Said she in love with the fitness type.